So a little bit about myself. I'm come from a local enterprise called Encompass. I think most of you except NG know us, know me. I'm also a board director at the ACE Concern. I used to be the Idaho director for Pink Alliance, and now I'm the education director. So I do a lot of school talk, university talk. I also, sorry, let me admit Megan. I don't know what I'm doing. Oops, sorry. Sorry, give me a moment, guys. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just doing the introduction. Yeah, so I also curated something called the LGBT City in the City Tour, and I will tell that to you in a bit. So basically, my LGBT story, I know I'm have homosexual tendencies since I'm 12. I went to a local girls' school, but I didn't really start my LGBT advocacy work until maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, and the story is I went out with LGBT with a straight girl, and basically we were very close. We were dating, and then one day we were kissing in the IFC after watching a movie, and I kind of pushed her away. I said, "This is a public space. Many people will saw us, and somebody did saw us, so her family saw us." Family friends saw us and told her mom, and then because of homophobia, she was scared that her mom will punish her for seeing a girl. She stopped seeing me, so I was basically heartbroken, and because of that, I started LGBT in the City tour. Some of you have been in my tour, some of you haven't. It's one of the first LGBT tour in Asia, and we look at LGBT history. We look at some of the court case. We look at gay sauna. We look at sex shop. So it's very fun and very educational. We have many educators who came and social workers who want to learn about how to interact with LGBT teens. We also have high school students who come to our tour before. So that's some of my work. So at Encompass, we are a small social enterprise. We focus on SDG and D&I training. So I do a lot of training for different companies, whether it's LGBT inclusive language, whether it's cultural competency, how to be ally. So this is just a short list of my of company that I work with. So Encompass is really set out to look at the Sustainable Development Goals. I think most of you know what those are, and I will shortly make those linkage between LGBT and SDGs. So one of the most important principle of SDG is how to leave no one behind. And you can see here, it could be due to discrimination, it could be due to socioeconomic status. And LGBT people are definitely one of the marginalized group here. And I'll give you some case study all across the world. Most example here will be from Hong Kong. And I know, I think most of you here are from Hong Kong. So let me do a little fun polling. Probably some of you would know this. Sorry, this is my new computer, so I don't know how this works. Oops. Sorry, give me a moment. How do I do this? Yeah, so let me launch this. Sorry, I'm using my backup my computer. My own computer is under fixing now. So I just want to see your LGBT knowledge. Yeah, can you guess which is the first country that legalized same-sex marriage? It's also a country that's very popular with overseas LGBT to get married. One of my lesbian friend actually get married there a few years ago. So. And there's a second question, which event is widely seen as marking the beginning of the modern gay rights movement? Okay, seems all of you know that. Okay, some of you put first gay liberation day, so let's see. So yes, the correct answer is, sorry, I need to remove that. Yeah, the first country is Netherlands. There are many other countries who legalize same-sex marriage now. The latest including Ecuador and Costa Rica. And in terms of this question, which marking the beginning of the modern gay rights movement, for those of you who might not heard of it, it's the Stonewall Riot. So what happened is in 1969, there was a gay bar, basically Stonewall Inn, and the police was trying to harass them, and supporters there was trying to resist the police. And that was a tipping point of the gay liberation movement. And basically Pride Month is as one of the event in June, and that's why I picked today to do this event on June 1st. June is the Pride Month to commemorate and honor this Stonewall event, which is the pivotal movement of LGBT in the world. So if we look at global status of LGBT globally, unfortunately, in some of the countries, which you can see the dark red here, in Africa, in some parts of the Middle East, you still get death penalty for being gay. And even in Asia, like for example, in Singapore, it's still illegal to be gay officially, although you have pink dots and all that, but it's still illegal to be gay. So worldwide, of course, we see LGBT progress, but not everywhere has progress. And there will be some example, like for example, in Russia, we see a lot of homophobia behavior. And these are just closer into APEC, where we are based in. I know a lot of you know about the Taiwan same-sex marriage law, but I think just a month or two ago, that there were international same-sex marriage that were passed in Taiwan. And in terms of China, there's a very big pink economy. China's pink economy is the third in the world, which the first is Europe, the second is US, and the third is China. So it's a lot of dollar. And in terms of marriage equality in Japan, if you are following the news, there have been some discussion on that recently as well. And in Hong Kong, unfortunately, sorry, let me unmute Tony. Sorry, I don't know how to do that. Give me a sec. Sorry, I'm really not familiar with this computer. Let me get Tony in. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Let me find my PowerPoint. Where's my PowerPoint? Sorry, guys, my computer broke down last week, so I'm using not my official computer, so I'm a bit rusty on this one. Let me open it again. I apologize for this. I'm usually much better at this. I'm not using my own computer today. Okay, so where are we? We are here. Yep. So I'm just saying that in Hong Kong, we don't have a lot of LGBT rights in the legislation. We still don't have the anti-discrimination law, but there have been many progress in terms of the LGBT rights in the courts. So one of the most groundbreaking news in Hong Kong, and some of you would know that that's the QT case, where there was that the government recognized the same-sex partnership in the spousal visa application. And I actually know some expats would want to move to Hong Kong because of this dependent visa thing. So now let's look at Asia. Interestingly, this is a report done by Economist just a few months ago. If you ask people across APEC where they find they are a company that makes substantial progress in LGBT diversity and inclusion, is China, and Hong Kong is interestingly zero. So not sure why is that. Maybe Rendell can comment on that later. And in terms of the Pride strike, you will see that, yeah, there were some respondents that are very comfortable in terms of working with LGBT, in terms of LGBT support group. So I won't go into details with that. So the business case of LGBT inclusion, why do we want LGBT inclusion? People have that they are being able to be their authentic self, and that will increase their productivity. They will also more likely to stay in the workforce, and also a lot of brand marketing. So now there are many brands, whether it's Nike, fans, that they target the LGBT market. And I'm sure you see some of this brand. And in Hong Kong, maybe you see some brands like Cafe Pacific who does that as well. And then also, Renda can speak in that LGBT does affect mental health as well. So an inclusive workplace will definitely enhance employee well-being. And we'll look at some statistics for that very shortly. So now we talk about SDG. So we're not going to talk about all the SDG, but we'll focus on a few that related to LGBT inclusion. So in a short while, I'll introduce each of the SDG and I'll introduce to you what are some of the challenges and some of the global statistics. I know it's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but you will get this deck later, so don't worry about it. So how do we measure the inclusion of LGBT people? We can look at their political or civic participation, whether they can be recognized in terms of their gender identity, and that apply to a lot of the transsexual or transgender friends, whether LGBT people are being decriminalized, and then we look at education. And I know we have an educator here in the room, whether they have access to education, whether the education needs, whether the curriculum is inclusive enough. We also look at health, whether there are disparities because of the LGBT status. We look at personal security and violence. As I said, in some parts of the world, homophobia is really bad. You get beaten up because of being gay. And then we'll look at economic well-being. How does that relate to the productivity or competitiveness of the economy? So yeah, so for example, the first one, we look at poverty. We can see that and this is a research by Open for Business, and I really recommend you to look at it. By 2030, that people will be eradicate poverty. This is the target, and the LGBT inclusion is closely related to the economic development. And the second, if you look at competitiveness in terms of the world economic world economy, if the economy approves same-sex relationship, and there's a lot of the developed countries that we look at, whether it's Netherlands, Canada, the economy, it seems they are more innovative and more competitive. And if we look at poverty as well, that many countries, and this is, you see, sorry, the figure is not here, but the poverty, if you is transgender, is actually the worst as compared to cisgender gay men. So cisgender gay men is less being discriminated, but if you are a transgender or you are a cis bisexual woman, you are more likely to be in poverty. And there are ways that businesses can help to reduce those inequalities. And then also in many countries that men are controlling capital, inheriting property, and that it will put pressure to lesbian and bisexual women to a heterosexual marriage. And I don't think that happened in Hong Kong a lot, but I think in China that is partly true, that some gay couple, whether it's man or woman, they will force into marriage just so they can get the inheritance and all that. So business can pay a part by supporting micro enterprise and microfinance in that. And then now we look at well-being, and I used the case in Hong Kong as a board member of AIDS Concern, and we can see that there's a record number of HIV cases in Hong Kong, even though with all the AIDS Concern of all the help, and the COVID, unfortunately, have exacerbated the existing social and economic inequality of LGBT people. And one of the reasons is, if you look at AIDS Concern, because of COVID, a lot of people are not able to get testing of HIV testing, or they are in poverty, they lose their job, so they cannot get the PrEP work as well. So yeah, if I think businesses can be a key partner in the response to HIV to help the worker to ensure work and health and safety. Another one of my favorite but very sad statistics is Hong Kong people have 6 times, if you are LGBT, you have 6 times as likely to have depression and all that. And some of you might read that there was recently a research by Dr. Sun Yudong, which is a very well-known sexuality researcher in Hong Kong. And he also said that transgender people are much at risk in terms of discrimination and their mental health. And actually, I think that statistics was more than half of them contemplate suicide. So it's a very real topic. So maybe in here, Randa, do you mind to share maybe a little bit of your survey, what you find out, and you can let the group know if you can unmute yourself about mental health?
Hey, Benita. So
Hi.
I'm currently using my mobile, so I don't have
Yes.
the deck with me. I wasn't really prepared to share, but
Yeah.
in general, the theme there is that in many markets around Asia where we conducted the survey, there is a direct relationship between being LGBT, and then the second layer to that is whether you're out or you are in the closet. And how it impacts in respective cultures. So just talking about Hong Kong in general, there are a lot of resistance within the LGBT community in terms of getting themselves known or getting out there, because they fear a lot about the perceptions of people and how it would impact their respective careers. So that level of being uncomfortable also erodes their own decision making in life in general. And that in itself causes a lot of depression and anxiety, because being in the closet is a lot of work. So that in itself impacts a lot more in their productivity, the way they work, and the way they decide on things that are important in their lives.
Thank you. And anybody have questions for Randall or comments? Okay, shy group. Okay, thank you for sharing. So we also see that LGBT people struggle a lot with addiction, and I don't know how many of you have heard of chemsex as well, that using drug in sex. And I've heard, I don't have a number, but I've heard from anecdotes that with COVID, actually, there are a lot more chemsex party. People were bored, they can't go to a gay bar, so they have private chemsex party. And that have to do with addiction, and that also led to more STD and HIV as well. So definitely that is one of the health issue as well. Yes, if business can help also tackle substance abuse and harmful use of alcohol, and also if we can have assistance program to help with counseling. But I know in Hong Kong it's very difficult, so it might not apply to Hong Kong. But this is this statistics and recommendation you see is from a global report. So another one is whether in education, and I know we have an educator here. So this is some is a research you see from Galsen, and you can see that in education, LGBT students face many different stress, and that could be from restricting whether they can wear whether they can freely express their gender in terms of uniform, whether the curriculum have LGBT topics, inclusion, whether they are not accepted to extracurricular activities. For example, dancing, if they go to a prom, which is not common in Hong Kong, but overseas, whether they can dance with somebody of the same gender, whether there are certain gender norms, and then a different discipline because of the difference in terms of policy or disciplines. I don't know if you want to have any comment here. Sorry, is it Anna or Annabelle? Sorry, I didn't get your name correctly.
Ange.
So Ange, sorry, Ange.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, I've been teaching in international schools for about 17 years, so I definitely have seen an increase in LGBTQI plus inclusion in schools. That's usually driven by the students. There's often a false fear of parents, especially in fee-paying schools. But more and more we're seeing schools sort of have the courage to stand up against the one or two parents that might speak. I mean, at my school today, we had World Pride Launch Day. The kids made videos to talk about different sexualities and different terms that the community might not be aware of. So I'm seeing more and more of that happening. I think that there's advantages in different parts of the world if you've got laws to back against. So one of the challenges we have here in Hong Kong, for any school, obviously, is that there's that, you talked earlier about the laws and discrimination. If you can't sort of say, well, this is the law here, or this is illegal to do this and the other, then schools can kind of don't have to take the steps and be courageous in this. But certainly for us, and I know that we're lucky because we're perhaps in an international school, we I don't know if we're allowed to be a little bit more courageous in this regard, but certainly being led by the students, a lot of these things are being addressed. It could be better, but we're well on the way in terms of all of these things that you mentioned, uniforms and names and pronouns and inclusive text and curriculum. These are things we talk about all the time, actively trying to improve.
Yeah, I certainly I do some talks not only international school and local school as well. And actually, I did one in Hong Kong Riot, which is a very famous local boys' school. And what I found is traditionally, I think there were, at least in local university, there were certain LGBT group, you can talk about it. But in secondary school, the school doesn't really organize too much pride event. But I found that I have similar experience with you. I think the students are very curious and they want to talk about it. And I think especially a lot of them are questioning about their sexuality, or they have friends who are coming out or questioning. I think definitely schools or educators can be more open. And I'm just talking about local school, local Hong Kong school. And I used to do a youth policy development. In Hong Kong, we are still following the sexuality education curriculum back in the 1990s. So very backwards. We don't talk about sexuality. We don't talk about relationship. Everything is about contraception. So I think there's definitely a lot more that can be done in education to help students to have a more inclusive environment. So thank you for that, Angie. Yeah, another statistics, and this is from US. We see that some students, especially transgender students, they are not planning or cannot complete their high school. Not in Hong Kong. This is not Hong Kong. This is overseas. But I think one of the reasons, especially for transgender, is because they are going through the surgery, and they feel at this, especially in teenage, I think there's a lot of bullying if you are transitioning, and it's a very difficult period. And with all that mental stress, they rather to quit school. In Hong Kong and in overseas, I think that you can get a transition at an earlier age before you turn 18. In Hong Kong, you do need to be 18 to get the surgery. But yeah, I mean, there have been some recent reports in the local media that some young teens are also considered transitioning. And I have actually, I have a friend who is endocrinologist. She worked with a lot of teenagers who are doing this as well. So actually, I think the numbers are higher than we think in Hong Kong. So yeah, anyway, I think if there are more vocational training or work experience to help LGBT people, if they are not competing school, if we can help them to be in help in employment and help to eliminate that disparity in education. So LGBT is not only about the gay man, it's also about the women as well. And here is some statistics you see from the McKinsey Women in Workplace Survey. And you can see, for example, it's very interesting that bisexual women actually get the most sexual harassment. And I don't know if you can guess why, and that's my guess. The report doesn't have an analysis, and my guess is because, and I think that's a common theme across the world, is bisexual women actually get more harassment or discrimination as compared to lesbian women, because they are being seen as they can date both men and women, and the lesbian woman is like, oh, you can go both ways. So the lesbian woman actually discriminated the bisexual woman as well. And actually, for one of the Idaho event, I also looked at bisexual. So I think that's why they experience the most type of microaggression or sexual harassment. So interesting statistic there. Another thing is when we think about gender violence or sexual violence, we usually think about men towards women only. We don't think about a same-sex couple, but this report a few years ago by a group in Hong Kong, they actually find that domestic violence is actually quite common in female sexual minorities as well. And I think actually if you do the survey now, it will be even higher. And that's not only for same-sex, but all couple. And that's because I think for COVID, everybody is locked down in the home. You cannot go out. So it's easier for conflicts as well. This is another statistics on lesbian or bisexual or queer women in the management level. And you can see that LGBT women are less as compared to LGBT men in terms of leadership. And I certainly see that a lot, especially in the LGBT event in corporate. It's usually very dominated by gay men, gay white men, especially in Hong Kong. I think they are louder. And a lot of lesbian women, first, they don't come out at work. And I think actually just a few days ago, Dr. Denise Tang, which is a very quite a famous lesbian researcher in Hong Kong. She also did research on the lesbian women in the financial industry in Hong Kong. And she also found that LGBT women in Hong Kong have this glass ceiling as well. So the gender equality issue definitely happened for lesbian women as well. And now we look at decent work and economic growth. This is a very interesting map, and I recommend you to go to this website. It's called Start Out Pride Economic Index. And if you go to this website, you will see that you can zoom into different states and different countries. You can see that actually those like you can see in the California and New York, those who are more LGBT inclusive, they actually have more jobs, more economic opportunities. And this is another, especially for transgender community. They, in terms of the workplace, they also face a lot more workplace discrimination. I think for gay men and lesbian, they have an easier time. But if you're a transgender, and especially in certain industry, it's easier to get discrimination. And I'll share with you this case. I think a lot of you might heard that HSBC is now very inclusive and LGBT friendly, but they are not always like that. Especially in Hong Kong, actually, just I think maybe 8 or 9 years ago, there was a male to female employee. She came out and she as a transgender, and she actually got discrimination. She was not allowed to use certain bathrooms. She was not allowed to do promotion or get a salary raise. And because of that, that led to HSBC sent internal email to all staff saying apologize to that person, and they will review the LGBT policy. And now actually HSBC is one of the leading firms in Hong Kong in terms of LGBT rights. But it's not always the case. And unfortunately, a lot of this LGBT rights or this progress is made because of an unfortunate incident. So this is also the business case of LGBT. Higher performing companies are more likely to be LGBT friendly, more inclusive. And with the companies I work with, definitely for the MNCs, a lot of them are having LGBT inclusive policy. And I know actually for some company, they now have diversity quota. So actually I've helped Fidelity and Grad Connection last year in terms of hiring LGBT fresh graduates. It's not common, but I think it's changing now, definitely. And then now reduce inequality. And I think this one probably have the strongest linkage to LGBT rights. So for example, in many countries, you are you are required to undergo first forced sterilization or full sexual reassignment surgery before you can change the legal gender. So that's the case for Hong Kong, for example. And for example, for a lot of female to male, it's very difficult for them to have a full surgery because an artificial penis is extremely painful. And a lot of them don't want to do the surgery. But if they don't do that, they actually cannot change their ID. So this is one of the discrimination policy. Also in, for example, even in Hong Kong, now, even though same-sex relationship is legal, we don't have real same-sex marriage rights. So that's one of the policy that I think a lot of Hong Kong groups are working on. In some countries, LGBT groups are not allowed to form NGOs. And I know now in China, for example, some LGBT groups are under some sort of pressure as well. Yeah, so that's definitely happening. And in some parts of the world, same-sex couples or trans people are not allowed to access certain social services. So this was the case I mentioned earlier in Hong Kong, the QT case, which attract top 10, the QT case, which allowed a same-sex dependent visa. Definitely in Hong Kong, I think this have made a very positive move for expats or top talents to come to Hong Kong of the dependent visa issue. But of course, this is only one of the many rights of same-sex couple. They also have inheritance rights and other rights. Yeah, I think consumers are really ready to support LGBT inclusion. There are many research now that done that a consumer will actually boycott a brand if they find that they are not inclusive, or they would unlikely to buy a product from a country that has anti-gay laws. So I think the consumer definitely are really moving to, and even in Hong Kong, I think you can see like a McDonald's. I don't know if some of you see the recent ad. They have a delivery app, and they find a very famous group in Hong Kong now called Mirror, like a boy band. They call Gang Tao, the Gang B, very attractive for young people in Hong Kong, and they make an ad out of the same-sex relationship. So definitely, I think companies are targeting the LGBT market. In terms of sustainable cities, I think many people don't think about LGBT with SDG 11, but actually it is very related. A lot of LGBT people, because of the discrimination, they might not be able to find home. And another example is, for example, for elderly people, LGBT elderly people, in most countries, there are no LGBT friendly elderly home for them. And if you are gay or lesbian, and if you are single and you want a safe environment, you really want that. And we can see that if the city is more inclusive, you can see the actually the GDP per capita actually increase. So there's a very strong business case for LGBT inclusion. And then peace, justice, and strong institution. As I said, unfortunately, even in London, you can see the number. There are many homophobic hate crimes, even though if we, sorry, let me admit Stacy. So even though you think that, what am I doing here? Sorry, let me move this. Even though you think places like London is pretty LGBT inclusive, but actually they're not. The homophobic hate crimes are high, and countries in Russia, like Russia, also as well, and also in Middle East. So homophobia is still very real. I think in Hong Kong we are quite lucky. I don't think you get attacked for being gay, but definitely there are some sort of microaggression and gay remarks, but not hate crime per se. I don't think you get beat up for being gay. But I think if you remember a few years ago, actually, the former legislator in Hong Kong, Ray Chan, he was on an MTR, and he was being shouted by two straight middle-aged women, saying that he was like a son of a bitch, he was an asshole just because he was a gay. But so that definitely happened. Yeah, a lot of organizations don't have legal legislation because of what various reasons. They are not being recognized as well. So this was a research that done by Outright Action International. So in an ideal world, we can have accountability and transparency to help the LGBT inclusion. This is a statistics done by McKinsey, Women in the Workplace. Also, LGBT men or women, they are as likely as the straight ones to aspire to top executive positions. So because they won't decrease their aspiration to become a senior management just because of their sexuality. However, they do face the gas ceiling, as I was talking about. So I know I go through very quickly, but I think we have an interesting group here. So I'm going to stop the recording, and I'm just going to leave this as an open room.